Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Tommy Blackwater, and I need to tell you what happened to me in Alaska. The doctors say I had some kind of breakdown, that stress and isolation made me imagine things. But I know what I saw up there. I know what hunted me. I was 23, fresh out of ranger training, when they assigned me to Denali National Park. My first real job. My brothers always said I was too soft for this kind of work. They were all cops or soldiers, real tough guys. I wanted to prove them wrong. Show everyone that the youngest Blackwater could handle himself in the wilderness. The other rangers tried to warn me about the remote sections. Don't patrol the Northwest trails alone, they said. Something's not right up there. Old-timers talked about voices in the mountains, sounds that didn't make sense. I figured it was just echoes bouncing off the rocks. These Alaska guys loved their ghost stories. My supervisor, Frank, was a 60-year-old Alaskan native who'd worked these mountains for 30 years. He had deep lines around his eyes and never smiled much. When he handed me the assignment for trail maintenance in Sector 7, he looked worried. "You sure you want this one, kid? It's a 3-day job, all alone up there." "I can handle it," I told him. I was tired of everyone treating me like I might break. "The radio coverage is spotty," Frank continued. "And there's been incidents. Hikers getting confused, reporting things that don't add up." "What kind of things?" Frank shrugged. "Voices. People hearing their own voices calling to them from places they've never been. Probably just mountain acoustics playing tricks." I laughed. "Come on, Frank. It's 1,962, not 1,862. I've got modern equipment and proper training. A few echoes aren't going to scare me." He didn't laugh back. "Just stay in radio contact, okay? Check in every 6 hours." The next morning, I loaded my truck with supplies and equipment. New warning signs to replace the base. Weathered ones, tools for trail repair, camping gear for 2 nights. The weather forecast was perfect. Clear skies, warm temperatures, easy job. The drive up to the trailhead took 2 hours on increasingly rough roads. By the time I parked and shouldered my pack, I was excited. This was exactly what I'd dreamed about during training. Real wilderness work, responsibility, a chance to prove myself. The trail wound through thick pine forest before opening onto alpine meadows. Mount McKinley dominated the skyline, massive and white against the blue sky. I'd never seen anything so beautiful. Ohio had nothing like this. I whistled while I worked that first morning, replacing a fallen sign that warned hikers about unstable terrain ahead. The job was simple. Pull out the old posts, dig new holes, set the fresh signs. Honest work in clean air under an endless sky. That's when I heard it. "Tommy. Hey, Tommy." Someone was calling my name from across the valley. I looked up, shading my eyes against the sun, but couldn't see anyone on the opposite ridge. The voice sounded familiar, though I couldn't place it. "Hello?" I called back. "Who's there?" No answer. Just the wind through the trees and my own echo bouncing off the mountainside. I figured it was just another hiker, maybe someone who'd seen my ranger uniform and wanted to ask directions. Sound traveled weird in the mountains. I went back to work, driving the new post into the rocky ground. But something bothered me about that voice. It had sounded too familiar, like someone I knew very well. 20 minutes later, I heard it again. This time it was clearer. "Tommy, over here, come check this out." I stopped hammering and listened carefully. The voice was coming from a cluster of trees, about 100 yards down the slope. But here's the thing that made my stomach twist. It sounded exactly like me. Not similar. Exactly like my own voice calling my own name. I called out again. "Who's down there?" "Just come here, man. You need to see this." My own voice, using words I hadn't spoken, coming from trees I hadn't been near. I set down my tools and walked toward the sound, my hand instinctively moving to the radio clipped to my belt. This was wrong. People didn't perfectly mimic other people's voices. Not like this. The forest was quiet as I approached the trees. Too quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just my boots crunching on dried pine needles. I found nothing. No person, no sign anyone had been there, no disturbed ground, no footprints, nothing. But as I turned to head back to my work site, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Two voices, both mine, having a conversation. Think he's buying it? Nah, he's too smart. Kid's suspicious. We need to be more careful. Give it time. He'll come around. They were talking about me. Using my voice to discuss me like I wasn't there, like I couldn't hear them planning something. I ran back to my tools, grabbed the radio, and called Frank. Base, this is Blackwater. Come in. Static, then Frank's gravelly voice. Go ahead, Tommy. I'm having some kind of acoustic problem up here. Really weird echoes. Sounds like voices. You feeling okay, son? Maybe altitude getting to you? No, I'm fine. It's just, the sounds are really strange. Like perfect voice mimicry. Long pause. Want me to send backup? That was exactly what I didn't want. Prove I couldn't handle a simple maintenance job on my first assignment. Give my brothers more ammunition about soft little Tommy. No, I'm good. Just thought you should know. Okay. Check in at 6. Understood? Copy that. I clipped the radio back to my belt and looked around the meadow. Everything seemed normal again. Bright sun, clear air, beautiful mountains. Maybe it really was just weird acoustics. Maybe I was letting the old-timers' ghost stories get to me. But deep down, I knew something was watching me, something that could perfectly copy my voice. And it was learning. I finished the sign installation by mid-afternoon, trying to shake off the voice incidents. Had to be some kind of echo effect. Sound bounced strange in mountain valleys. I'd read about that in training. Perfectly logical explanation. The next work site was a mile up the trail where a bridge needed repair. I loaded my tools and hiked deeper into the wilderness, following a path that hadn't seen maintenance in years. Overgrown sections forced me to push through thick brush, and more than once I lost the trail completely. That's when the conversation started. Not single voices calling my name, but full discussions between two people. Both using my voice. Both talking about things I'd never said. Remember when we first got to Alaska? One voice said from somewhere to my left, "Yeah, thought we were so tough." The other replied from my right, "Dad would've laughed his ass off." I stopped walking. My father had died when I was 16. Nobody here knew that. I'd never mentioned it to anyone at the park. "Frank seems okay," the first voice continued. "Better than expected. Still thinks we're just a dumb kid from Ohio. We'll show him." They were discussing my thoughts. Private thoughts I'd never spoken aloud. How could an echo know what I was thinking? I unslung my pack and pulled out the radio. "Base, this is Blackwater." "Go ahead." "Frank, I need to ask you something. Has anyone else reported voice phenomena in this area? Specifically, voices that repeat personal information?" Silence for almost 30 seconds. Then, "Tommy, where exactly are you right now?" I checked my map and gave him my coordinates. "Okay, listen carefully. There's been some incidents in that sector. Hikers getting disoriented, reporting impossible things. Nothing dangerous, but unsettling." "What kind of incidents?" "People hearing family members calling to them, voices that knew personal details. We always assumed it was stress and isolation causing audio hallucinations." "What if it's not hallucinations?" Another long pause. "Son, you want me to send a team up there?" The offer was tempting. But accepting help would mean admitting I couldn't handle the assignment. Word would get back to my brothers. Soft little Tommy needing rescue from some weird echoes. "No, I'm fine, just curious about the reports." "All right, but Tommy, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, don't be a hero." I signed off and continued up the trail, but the conversations kept following me, always just out of sight, always using information they shouldn't have. By the time I reached the bridge, I was seriously unsettled. The old wooden structure spanned a narrow creek, several planks rotted through, and railings loose. Dangerous for hikers. I needed to replace the worst boards before dark. I set up my tools and started pulling out the damaged planks. Hard physical work helped calm my nerves. This was real, practical labor. No mysterious voices could mess with properly set bridge timbers. That's when I saw him. A figure in a ranger uniform standing on the opposite bank, about 50 yards downstream. Same height as me, same build, same red hair visible under his campaign hat. He was facing away, looking up at the mountains like he was surveying the area. "Hey," I called out, "you with the Park Service?" The figure turned around. It was me. Exact duplicate, down to the freckles and the small scar on my chin from a childhood accident. He smiled and waved, then pointed at something behind me. I spun around, but nothing was there. When I looked back, the duplicate was gone. My hands were shaking as I reached for the radio. This was beyond weird acoustics or stress hallucinations. I had seen another version of myself. That was impossible. "Base, this is Blackwater. I need immediate backup. What's your status, son? I just saw. I think someone's impersonating a park ranger up here. Someone who looks exactly like me." "Say again?" "There's someone in a ranger uniform who appears to be copying my appearance." This is beyond the voice phenomena. Frank's voice got very serious. "Tommy, I'm sending a team right now. Give me your exact location and stay put." I gave him my coordinates again and promised to wait for backup. But as I set down the radio, a voice spoke right behind me. "Don't call them." I spun around. The duplicate was standing 10 feet away, close enough to see clearly. Perfect copy of my face, my uniform, even my equipment. But his eyes were wrong. Too bright, too knowing. "Who are you?" I asked, backing toward my tool bag. "I'm you," he said, and his voice was exactly mine. Same tone, same accent, same speech patterns. "Or you're me. Hard to tell the difference." "That's impossible." "Is it?" The duplicate tilted his head, studying me. "You called for backup. That was a mistake." "Stay back," I warned, pulling out my service knife. The duplicate laughed, and it was my laugh. "You going to stab yourself, Tommy?" That's when I noticed other things. His uniform was too clean for someone who'd been hiking. His boots showed no trail dust. His face had no sweat despite the afternoon heat. "What are you?" "Better question," the duplicate said, stepping closer, "is what are you going to do when your backup arrives and finds two identical rangers? How will you prove you're the real one?" The thought hit me like ice water. Frank was sending a rescue team to find one lost ranger. They'd arrive and discover two people claiming to be Tommy Blackwater, both with the same face, same voice, same uniform. How would I prove my identity? "They'll know," I said, but my voice sounded uncertain even to me. "Will they?" "I know everything you know. Your childhood in .this, Ohio. Your brothers' names. Your father's death. Your first girlfriend's name was Sarah Chen, and you were too shy to kiss her until the 8th grade dance." He was right. About all of it. Details I'd never shared with anyone in Alaska. "I know you wet the bed until you were 9. The duplicate continued. "I know about the time you stole money from your mother's purse to buy baseball cards. I know you're afraid your brothers think you're weak. Stop. I know because I am you. Every memory, every fear, every secret shame. The only difference is that I'm better at being Tommy Blackwater than you are." I raised the knife, but my hand was trembling. "How do you fight something that knows everything about you?" "The backup team will be here in 2 hours, the duplicate said. "Plenty of time for me to practice being you. By the time they arrive, I'll be more convincing than the original." That's when I heard the helicopter, the distant thrum of rotor blades echoing off. The mountains, getting closer. The duplicate smiled. "Sounds like they're early." I ran. I grabbed my pack and sprinted into the forest, crashing through undergrowth, branches tearing at my uniform. Behind me, I heard the duplicate calling out in my voice. "Help, over here, thank God you came." The helicopter was circling overhead, looking for the signal. They'd find the duplicate standing by the bridge, appearing exactly like the ranger they'd come to rescue. A perfect Tommy Blackwater telling them he was fine, just spooked by some weird echoes. And I'd be the crazy imposter hiding in the woods. I kept running until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. Then I collapsed behind a fallen log, gasping for air, trying to think. Something was hunting me. Something that could perfectly copy not just my appearance and voice, but my memories, my entire identity. And now it was taking my place. I spent that night hidden in dense forest, afraid to use my deadit, flashlight or radio. Through the trees, I could see lights from the rescue team's camp near the bridge. They'd found the duplicate and accepted him as the real Tommy Blackwater. I heard laughter, conversation, the sounds of a successful rescue operation. But I also heard something else. Voices. Multiple voices. all mine. The duplicate wasn't alone. As darkness deepened, I crept closer to the edge of the clearing. What I saw made my stomach turn. 3 figures in ranger uniforms sat around the campfire with the rescue team. All 3 were identical copies of me, talking and joking with the real rangers like they'd known them for years. "Thanks for coming out," one duplicate said. "Just got spooked by the acoustics up here." "Happens to everyone their first time in the deep wilderness," replied Jim, one of the veteran rangers I'd met during orientation. "Mountain sounds play tricks on your mind." "Exactly," another duplicate agreed. "Nothing supernatural, just needed to calm down and think logically." I watched in horror as my copies convinced the rescue team that everything was fine. They were perfect actors, knowing exactly what to say, how to behave. The real rangers saw nothing unusual. After an hour, the rescue team packed up and left. I waited until their helicopter disappeared before moving closer. The 3 duplicates remained by the dying fire. "He's watching," one said, looking directly toward my hiding spot. "Of course he is," another replied. "Wouldn't you watch yourself?" "We need more information. Personal details, family connections." "Already working on it." The 3rd duplicate pulled out what looked like my radio and started talking. But the voice that came out wasn't mine. It was my brother Mike's voice, with his Boston accent and military vocabulary. "Tommy, you there, kid?" My blood went cold. How did it know Mike's voice? I'd never called my family from Alaska, never even mentioned them on the radio. "Mike?" One duplicate responded in my voice. "How did you get this frequency?" "Called the Park Service. They gave me your emergency channel. Mom's worried sick. You were supposed to call last week." "Sorry, been busy with work." "Look, I know we've been hard on you. All the stuff about being soft, not tough enough for this job. We were wrong. Just want you to know we're proud of you." I bit my knuckle to keep from crying out. Mike would never say those words. My brother had never admitted being wrong about anything. But it was exactly what I wanted to hear. The acceptance I'd been craving my whole life. The duplicate was learning my emotional triggers. "Thanks, Mike. That means everything. Stay safe out there, little brother, and call Mom when you get back to base." The conversation ended, and the duplicates turned toward my hiding spot again. "Touching family moment," one said. "Think he bought it? Hook, line, and sinker. He wants approval so badly he'll believe anything." "Should we call the girlfriend next? Save her for later?" "We have all the time in the world." I backed away, deeper into the forest, my mind racing. These things, whatever they were, could mimic anyone's voice, not just mine. They were building a web of fake communications, learning my relationships, my weaknesses. But how many were there? I got my answer an hour later when I tried to circle back to my original campsite. Voices called to me from every direction. "Tommy, this way." "Over here, Tommy, help me, I'm lost." All my voice. Dozens of them. They'd surrounded me in the darkness, using my own voice to try to lure me out, but their positioning gave them away. They were moving in a coordinated pattern, like pack hunters. I climbed a tall pine tree and waited for dawn, listening to my own voice calling from the forest floor. Sometimes they argued with each other, discussing strategy in hushed tones. Sometimes they imitated distress calls, pretending to be injured or trapped. "Please help me." I fell and broke my leg. "The ranger station, where is it? I'm so lost. Is anyone there? Anyone at all?" Each call was perfect mimicry, complete with appropriate emotional inflection. If I hadn't seen them by the fire, I would have believed every one. As the first light filtered through the trees, the voices faded, but I could still see movement in the shadows below. Dark shapes that looked almost human, but not quite. They were waiting. I stayed in the tree until full daylight, then climbed down and started moving. I needed to reach a radio tower, contact the outside world, warn someone about what was happening, but every step took me deeper into their territory. Within an hour, the harassment began again. This time they used my family's voices. "Tommy?" My mother's voice, worried and loving. "Honey, where are you?" "Mom?" I called back before I could stop myself. "I'm so scared. These men, they have me. They say they'll hurt me if you don't come out." Rage flooded through me. Using my mother's voice was crossing a line. Even if I knew it was fake, hearing her plead for help triggered every protective instinct I had. Let her go. Just come to the clearing, Tommy. Come alone and we'll talk. I started toward the voice, then caught myself. My mother was safe in Ohio, hundreds of miles away. These things were manipulating me, using my emotions against me. But God, it sounded just like her. Please, honey, I'm hurt, I need you. I covered my ears and kept walking, but the voices followed. My father's voice, dead for 7 years. Son, I'm disappointed in you, running away like a coward. My brother Jim, always knew you were weak. Should have stayed in Ohio. My ex-girlfriend Sarah, I never loved you. Nobody could love someone so pathetic. Every cruel word I'd ever feared hearing, delivered in perfect, vocal mimicry by something that had studied my deepest insecurities. They were psychological warfare experts, cutting straight to my core fears. By midday, I was emotionally exhausted. The voices had cycled through every person I'd ever cared about, turning them all against me. Even knowing it was fake, the words hurt. They were designed to hurt. That's when I realized the true horror. These creatures didn't just copy voices and appearances. They copied personalities, memories, emotional connections. They were identity thieves on a supernatural level, stealing not just what made me Tommy Blackwater, but what made everyone around me who they were. And they were getting better at it. I reached the radio tower by late afternoon, a 50-foot metal structure on a bare hilltop. But when I tried to use the emergency transmitter, my own voice answered, "Park dispatch, this is Tommy Blackwater." Tommy, thank God, this is Tommy Blackwater, requesting immediate assistance. Pause. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? This is Ranger Tommy Blackwater. I'm at Radio Tower 7. Need emergency evacuation. Sir, this is Tommy Blackwater. I'm already at base camp. I think someone's playing a prank on this frequency. My duplicate was at park headquarters, convincing everyone that he was the real ranger. Any call for help would be dismissed as a hoax or equipment malfunction. I was completely cut off. As sunset approached, I saw them gathering on the slopes below the tower. Dozens of figures in ranger uniforms, all identical, all moving with purpose. They'd stopped pretending to hide. This was their mountain now. And tomorrow, they'd start replacing everyone else. That night on the radio tower, I finally understood what I was facing. These weren't just creatures that could mimic voices. They were something far worse. Identity parasites that fed on human personality itself. Every memory they copied, every voice they stole, made them more real and made their victims more hollow. Around midnight, one of them climbed the tower. It looked exactly like me, but moved with predatory grace no human possessed. When it reached the platform where I was huddled, it sat down casually, like we were old friends meeting for coffee. You're figuring it out, it said in my voice. Good, makes this more interesting. What are you? We're you. All of you. Every version you could have been, every path you didn't take. We exist in the spaces between identity. That's impossible. It smiled with my face. Is it? How many times have you looked in a mirror and felt like a stranger was staring back? How often do you act differently around different people? Which version is the real Tommy Blackwater? I didn't answer, but it continued anyway. You came here to prove you're not weak, but strength isn't about isolation, Tommy. It's about connection. And you've spent your whole life disconnected from everyone who mattered. You don't know anything about me. I know everything about you. Your fear of your brother's judgment, your guilt about your father's death, the way you pretend confidence while drowning in self-doubt. The words hit like physical blows because they were true. This thing had dissected my personality and found every weakness. I know you've been alone your entire life, it continued, even when surrounded by family, especially when surrounded by family. Stop, we can fix that. Join us willingly, and we'll take away the pain. No more fear, no more doubt, just the perfect version of yourself, the one everyone will love. By erasing who I really am, by becoming who you always wanted to be. It was tempting. God help me, it was actually tempting. The promise of confidence, of belonging, of being the person my brothers respected and my father would have been proud of. But it would mean ceasing to exist. The others, I said, how many people have you replaced? Hundreds over the decades. Hikers, rangers, researchers. Anyone who comes to the mountain alone and disconnected. We give them what they want most, a better version of themselves. And the originals? Fade away, forgotten. What's the point of an imperfect original when a perfect copy exists? I thought about my duplicate at park headquarters, charming my coworkers, filing my reports, living my life better than I ever could. In a few weeks, would anyone even remember the real Tommy Blackwater? Would it matter? You're thinking about it, the duplicate observed. Good, shows you're not completely stupid. That's when I made my decision. I stood up and walked to the edge of the platform. 50 feet below, rocks and broken trees waited. A quick fall, and the creatures would lose their template. No more copies of Tommy Blackwater. Suicide won't work, the duplicate said calmly. We already have everything we need. Your death just removes an inconvenience. Maybe. But I'm betting you need the original alive to keep copying from. Like a template. The duplicate's expression changed. For the first time, it looked uncertain. Even if that's true, it said, killing yourself won't save the others. We've been here for decades, Tommy. We have copies of hundreds of people. Your death changes nothing. Maybe not. But it stops you from getting better at being me. I looked down at the rocks. It would hurt, but it would be over quickly. Better than slowly losing myself to these identity thieves. Wait. The duplicate stood up. There's another way. What way? Fight us. If you can reach the old ranger station at the base of McKinley, there's a radio powerful enough to reach Anchorage. Warn people. Tell them what's happening here. Why would you tell me that? Because you'll never make it. We know every trail, every hiding spot. We know how you think, because we are how you do think. But at least you'll die trying to save others instead of just giving up. It was a challenge, delivered with my own voice and my own stubborn pride. The creature was betting that my ego wouldn't let me take the easy way out. It was right. I climbed down the tower and started running toward McKinley in the darkness. Behind me, voices called out, some mine, some my family's, all designed to slow me down. Tommy, wait, let's talk about this. Son, don't be a hero. Heroes die alone. You can't save anyone. You couldn't even save yourself. I ignored them and kept running. The old ranger station was 15 miles through rough terrain. If I could reach it by dawn, maybe I could get a warning out before they stopped me. But every step took me deeper into their territory, farther from any chance of rescue. And they were right behind me, learning my patterns, predicting my moves, becoming better versions of me with every passing hour. The hunt was on. I never reached the old ranger station. They found me at sunrise, collapsed from exhaustion near a frozen creek just 3 miles from my goal. But something had changed during that final chase. The voices that had tormented me for 3 days were confused, uncertain. Where is he going? This isn't right. He should have headed for the road. Why is he moving toward the station? That's not logical. That's when I realized the truth. These creatures could copy my memories, my voice, my appearance, but they couldn't copy something I'd never had. Genuine hope. See, I'd spent my whole life convinced I was weak, that I'd fail when it really mattered. But somewhere during those 3 days, running through the wilderness with impossible creatures hunting me, I'd found something I didn't know existed inside me. Courage. Real courage, not the fake bravado I'd used to hide my fears. The kind that acts despite terror, that keeps moving when everything seems hopeless. And the creatures couldn't mimic that because it wasn't part of my established personality. It was something new, something I'd discovered about myself in their pursuit. When they surrounded me at the creek, I was no longer the same Tommy Blackwater they'd been copying. You can't have what I've become, I told them, because I didn't know it existed until just now. The duplicates looked confused, their perfect mimicry faltering for the first time. I spent 23 years thinking I was weak, I continued. You copied that weakness perfectly, but you also showed me I was wrong. The lead duplicate, the one who'd talked to me on the tower, stepped forward. It doesn't matter. We have enough to continue without you. Do you? Or do you just have the broken, frightened version? The one who was too scared to call for help? Too proud to admit when he needed backup? I pulled out my radio and switched to the emergency frequency. This is Ranger Tommy Blackwater. I am at grid coordinates. I gave my location. I have critical information about missing persons in Denali National Park. Creatures here are impersonating park personnel. Do not trust anyone claiming to be me unless they can answer this question. What did my father say to me the night before he died? The duplicates rushed forward, but I was already talking again. The answer is nothing. He died in his sleep, and I never got to say goodbye. The thing that's been impersonating me at headquarters doesn't know that because it's not part of my official records or my conscious memories. It's just pain I've carried for 7 years. Static, then Frank's voice. Tommy? Son, where the hell have you been? That other person disappeared from base camp this morning. Just walked into the woods and vanished. They're not people, Frank. I don't know what they are, but they steal identities. Copy everything about a person and replace them. Tommy, you sound different. Because I am different, I learned something about myself up here. The duplicates were backing away now, their forms becoming less stable, less convincing. Whatever they fed on, my transformed identity was no longer providing it. Send help, I continued. But be careful. Some of these things might try to infiltrate the rescue team. On our way, stay put. I did stay put, watching the creatures fade back into the wilderness as the sun climbed higher. They'd failed to complete their copy of me because I'd become someone they couldn't predict or mimic. The rescue took 6 hours. When they found me, I was hypothermic and dehydrated, but alive. More alive than I'd ever been. Frank later told me they'd searched for the imposter who'd replaced me, but found no trace. Just an empty uniform hanging from a tree branch near the park entrance. The official report listed my experience as severe stress-induced hallucinations brought on by isolation and altitude. The Park Service transferred me to a different station and put me on administrative leave for psychological evaluation. The psychiatrists say I invented the creatures as a way to cope with my first real challenge. They say the voice mimicry was audio hallucinations. The duplicates were stress-induced visual distortions. Maybe they're right. But 6 months later, I'm back on duty, and I'm not the same person who went into those mountains. My brothers noticed it when I visited home. The way I stand straighter, speak with more confidence, don't flinch when they tease me. Alaska changed you, Mike said. Made you tougher somehow. I just smiled. If only he knew. Sometimes I still hear my own voice in the wilderness, calling from places I've never been. Other rangers report similar incidents. Sounds that know too much, sounds that don't quite fit. I tell them what Frank told me. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, don't be a hero. Call for backup. But I also tell them something Frank never said. Sometimes the wilderness shows you who you really are. And sometimes that person is stronger than you ever imagined. The creatures are still out there, somewhere in the vastness of Denali, still hunting for people who are lost inside themselves, disconnected from their true identity, still waiting for someone else who doesn't know their own strength. But they'll never get that second chance with me, because now I know exactly who Tommy Blackwater is, and I like him. My name is Beth Ironheart, and I've been a park ranger at Katmai for 12 years. People call me Alaska's top bear expert, which sounds fancy until you see the scars on my face and the way I limp when it rains. Bears taught me respect the hard way. But they also taught me how to keep people alive in their territory. That October morning in 1978, I was checking my equipment for what should have been a routine call. 3 hunters had gone missing in the backcountry, and the state police wanted me to investigate. Missing hunters weren't unusual. Guys got turned around, fell into ravines, or simply bit off more than they could chew. What made this different was the radio chatter I'd been hearing from other rangers. Words like torn apart and not normal kept coming through the static. I loaded my truck with the usual gear: tranquilizer rifle, emergency medical kit, bear spray, and my detailed maps of the area. The dart gun had enough juice to drop a grizzly in 30 seconds. In 12 years, I'd never needed more than one shot. My hands shook a little as I folded the last map, not from fear, from something much worse. My 16-year-old daughter Sarah was somewhere in those same mountains with her school camping group. 13 kids and 2 teachers, due back tomorrow. The missing hunters had been found 20 miles from Sarah's campsite, but 20 miles means nothing to a hungry bear. The drive into the backcountry took 2 hours on roads that barely deserved the name. October in Alaska meant early snow, and my truck's heater couldn't quite keep up with the cold seeping through the windows. The radio crackled with weather updates. A storm system was moving in fast. 6 hours, maybe 8, before it hit with full force. I parked at the trailhead where the hunters had started their trip 4 days ago. The silence felt wrong immediately. No bird songs, no squirrel chatter, none of the small sounds that make a forest feel alive. Even the wind seemed muffled, like the trees were holding their breath. My grandmother used to tell me stories about spirits in the wilderness, things that wore animal shapes but thought like men. She said the old ways of knowing could save your life when modern thinking failed you. I'd always believed in science over superstition, but standing in that dead quiet forest, I found myself listening for whispers my grandmother might have heard. The first set of tracks I found looked normal enough, size 14 boot prints heading deeper into the woods. The hunters had been following a game trail that led toward a series of box canyons where bears liked to den up for winter. Standard hunting territory, nothing unusual about the choice. But then I found the first blood. It wasn't the neat splatter you get from a clean kill. This was everywhere, painted across tree trunks 8 feet off the ground, soaked into the earth in patches too big for any animal I knew. The metallic smell hung in the air like a threat. I followed the blood trail for half a mile before I found him. The first hunter was spread across a small clearing in pieces too scattered to make sense of. His rifle lay bent in half against a pine tree. Whatever had done, this possessed strength that violated everything I knew about Alaska wildlife. But it was the tracks around the body that made my blood freeze. Bear paws, definitely. I could see the claw marks and the distinctive toe pattern. But the stride length was impossible. These prints were 12 feet apart. No bear on Earth moved with that kind of reach. Even a massive coastal brown bear topped out at maybe 6-foot strides when running full speed. I knelt down and touched one of the paw prints. The pad was twice the size of any bear track in my reference books, and the claw marks went deeper into the frozen earth than physics should allow. Something that heavy should have sunk further, left more of an impression. Instead, these tracks seemed almost careful. That's when I noticed what was missing. No scat, no territory markings, no signs of feeding. Bears were messy eaters and obsessive about marking their range. Whatever had killed this hunter had done it for reasons that had nothing to do with food or territory. My radio hissed with static, then something that sounded almost like a growl came through the speaker. I tried calling base, but got only more growls in response, low and rumbling like distant thunder. The wind picked up, carrying a scent I'd never smelled before. Bear musk, mixed with something else, something that made the hair on my arms stand up. It was like the smell of wet fur and old bones and something else I couldn't identify but made me want to run. I had 6 hours before the storm hit. 6 hours to find whatever had killed these hunters and make sure it stayed far away from my daughter's campsite. I checked my tranquilizer gun one more time and started following the impossible, tracks deeper into the mountains. Behind me, something howled in the distance. It sounded like a wolf, but wolves don't howl in the middle of the day. And wolves definitely don't howl with what sounded almost like human words mixed in with the animal cry. The trail led me deeper into country. I'd patrolled for over a decade, but everything looked wrong somehow. Trees I remembered as straight were twisted at odd angles. Rocks had been moved from their usual spots and arranged in patterns that looked almost like symbols. Even the light seemed different, filtered through branches that cast shadows shaped like reaching claws. 2 miles from the first body, I found the second hunter. This one was still breathing. He was pinned under a fallen log that must have weighed 300 pounds, his legs crushed beneath the weight. But what stopped my heart was seeing that the log hadn't fallen. It had been placed. Carefully, precisely. The ground around it was torn up from struggle, and I could see where he'd tried to claw his way free. "Help me," he whispered when he saw me approaching. His face was gray with shock and blood loss, but his eyes were clear, alert, terrified. They're still out there. They're still watching. I knelt beside him and started checking his injuries. Both legs were shattered, and he'd lost a lot of blood, but he might live if I could get him to a hospital. "Who's watching? Where's your partner?" "Not who," he said, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. What? Bears that walk like men, bears with red eyes that think like demons. His voice dropped to a whisper. They played with him before they killed him, laughed while they did it. I'd seen people in shock say crazy things before, but something in his voice made me believe him. Describe what you saw. Huge. 12 feet tall when they stood up. But they could run on 4 legs faster than anything I've ever seen. And smart. God, they were smart. They herded us like cattle, drove us exactly where they wanted us. He coughed, and blood speckled his lips. They set traps, used tools. One of them spoke to us. Bears don't speak, these did. His eyes were getting glassy, but he forced the words out. It said we were trespassing. Said this was their territory now. Said humans needed to learn their place in the food chain. I got on my radio to call for medical evacuation, but again got only static mixed with what sounded like growling. In the distance, I could hear something crashing through the underbrush, moving fast in our direction. You need to leave, the hunter said urgently. They're coming back. They always come back to check their kill. That's when I saw the tracks around us, dozens of them, circling the area like wolves might surround wounded prey. But these weren't wolf tracks. They were the same impossible bear prints I'd found at the first scene, but now I could see there were multiple sets. At least 6 different animals, maybe more. The crashing sounds were getting closer. I could hear branches snapping and what sounded like heavy breathing. Or maybe laughing. It was hard to tell the difference. Go, the hunter whispered. Find your daughter before they do. My blood turned to ice. How do you know about my daughter? Because that's where they're heading. They've been scouting the camping area all week, watching, learning, planning. He closed his eyes. I heard them talking about the children. Fresh meat, they called them. Easy prey. The sounds in the forest were getting closer, and now I could hear something else, a low rumbling that might have been communication between the creatures. They were coordinating, planning their approach like a military unit. I wanted to stay and help the wounded hunter, but I knew he was right. If these things were heading for Sarah's campsite, every second counted. I pressed my emergency medical kit into his hands and promised to send help as soon as I reached civilization. As I started to leave, something massive crashed out of the tree line 50 yards away. For just a moment, I saw it clearly, a bear-like shape but wrong in every possible way. Too tall, too lean, moving with a predator's grace that no bear possessed. Its eyes caught the light and reflected back red, like polished garnets. It saw me and stopped. For a heartbeat, we stared at each other across the clearing. Then it rose up on its hind legs, and I could see it was every bit as tall as the wounded hunter had claimed. Its front paws ended in claws that looked more like hands, with opposable thumbs that gripped a tree branch like a weapon. "You are the ranger," it said, in a voice like grinding stone. The words were clear, but wrong, as if a human throat was trying to make sounds it wasn't designed for. "You know these mountains." I fumbled for my tranquilizer gun, but the creature shook its massive head. "That will not help you," it continued. "We are beyond such simple tools. Your daughter camps in the eastern canyon. We have watched her group for 3 days. They will feed us well. Stay away from them," I managed to say, though my voice came out as barely a whisper. The creature tilted its head with almost human curiosity. "You offer challenge? One ranger against the pack? This could be entertaining." It dropped back to all fours and began circling the clearing, never taking those red eyes off me. "But first, we finish here. The wounded one has information we need." Behind me, I heard the injured hunter scream. I ran. I made it 2 miles before I had to stop and catch my breath. My radio was completely dead now. Not even static, just silence. The storm clouds were building faster than predicted, and the wind carried the scent of snow. In a few hours, visibility would drop to nothing. The trail to the eastern canyon, where Sarah's group was camping, led through rough country, switchbacks and rocky scrambles that would slow me down. But it would slow down the creatures too, unless they really could move as fast as the hunter had claimed. I found my answer at the next stream crossing. Claw marks scored the rock face of a 20-foot cliff, leading straight up and over instead of around. Whatever was hunting in these mountains didn't worry about terrain that would stop normal animals. Or normal people. The marks were fresh, still weeping sap where the claws had bitten into the stone. I counted at least 4 different track patterns in the soft earth by the stream. The pack was definitely moving toward the canyon, and they were moving fast. That's when I found the deliberate kills. A family of deer had been slaughtered near the stream, but not for food. The bodies were arranged in a line pointing toward the canyon, like road signs. Each animal had been killed with precise wounds that suggested the creatures were showing off their skill. This wasn't hunting, it was psychological warfare. I forced myself to examine the carcasses more closely. The claw wounds were too regular, too clean. These creatures had surgical control over their strength. They could kill efficiently when they chose to, which made the messy destruction of the hunters even more disturbing. They'd enjoyed that killing, made it last. My hands were shaking as I reloaded my tranquilizer gun. Even if the darts wouldn't stop these things, the gun felt better than nothing. I'd carried it through hundreds of dangerous encounters, and the weight of it was comforting. The trail began climbing toward the canyon rim, and I could see smoke from Sarah's campfire rising in the distance. At least they were still alive. The creatures might be playing a longer game, waiting for the right moment to attack. But as I got closer, I realized something was wrong with the smoke. Too much of it, and it was black instead of the gray-white you get from burning wood. Someone had thrown something synthetic into the fire, probably a tent or sleeping bag. I found the first body hanging from a tree branch 20 feet off the ground. It was Mr. Peterson, one of the teachers who'd volunteered to supervise the camping trip. He'd been positioned where anyone approaching the campsite would see him, and the expression frozen on his face told me he'd been alive when the creatures put him there. This was another message, another sign of what was waiting. Below the tree, scratched into the bare earth, was something that made my blood freeze. Words, spelled out in letters 3 feet tall: "Send the ranger or all die." They knew I was coming. They'd been planning this from the beginning. I circled around the main campsite, staying in the tree cover, trying to get a count of how many kids were still alive. I could see 3 tents that looked intact, and movement near the fire pit. But the silence was wrong. 13 teenagers should have been making noise, calling for help, doing something other than sitting quietly. That's when I realized they were being watched. The creatures were close enough to keep the survivors paralyzed with fear, but hadn't attacked yet. They were waiting for me. I crept closer and finally got a clear view of the camping area. 8 kids were huddled around the fire pit, including Sarah. They looked terrified but unharmed. The other teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, was standing guard with a camp shovel, but her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. Behind them, barely visible in the shadows between the trees, I could see pairs of red eyes watching. The pack was positioned in a perfect circle around the campsite. The kids were trapped in the center like prey animals in a pen. Sarah looked up suddenly, scanning the tree line. She'd always had good instincts, and somehow she sensed I was nearby. Our eyes met for just a moment across the distance, and I saw her mouth move. "Mom." That's when the largest of the creatures stepped into the open. It was even bigger than the one I'd encountered earlier. Maybe 13 feet tall when it reared up on its hind legs. Its fur was darker, almost black, and the intelligence in those red eyes was unmistakably malevolent. This was the alpha, the leader of the pack. "Ranger Beth," it called out in that same grinding voice. "You have come to bargain for the children. This pleases us. We enjoy negotiations." I stepped out of cover, keeping my tranquilizer gun ready. "Let them go. This is between you and me." The creature laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling down a mountain. "Nothing is between you and us, little ranger. You are food. They are food. The only question is who we eat first." "What do you want?" "Territory," the alpha replied. "These mountains belonged to our kind long before your people came with their guns and their noise. We have returned to reclaim what was always ours." It gestured toward the terrified children. "These will be our message to your kind, a warning about the price of trespassing." Around the clearing, I could see the other pack members moving closer. At least 6 of them, maybe more. Even if my tranquilizer gun worked, I couldn't take them all. "There has to be another way," I said. "There is," the alpha agreed. "Join them in the fire. Feed yourself to us willingly, and we will make the children's deaths quick. Refuse, and we will take days to finish our meal." Sarah was staring at me across the clearing. her face pale with terror but her eyes blazing with determination. She was her mother's daughter. She wouldn't go down without a fight, but against creatures like this, courage would only get her killed more painfully. I raised my tranquilizer gun and aimed at the alpha's center mass. Maybe the darts wouldn't stop it, but they might slow it down enough for the kids to run. "Last chance, Ranger," the creature said. "Choose quickly. Our patience grows thin, and the storm comes soon. We prefer to hunt in the dark." That's when Sarah did something that made my heart stop. She stood up from her place by the fire and walked directly toward the alpha creature. "Take me first," she said in a voice that didn't shake at all. "I'm the ranger's daughter. I'm worth more to you than the others." "Sarah, no!" I screamed, but my daughter ignored me. She walked right up to the massive creature like she was approaching a neighborhood dog. The alpha looked down at her with what might have been curiosity. "Brave cub," it rumbled, "but foolish. Your mother's blood runs strong in you." "My mother's the best ranger in Alaska," Sarah said, still not backing down. "She's kept people safe from bears for 12 years. She knows these mountains better than you do." The creature laughed again. "Child, we have hunted these peaks since before your people learned to make fire. We are not bears, though we wear dyed their shape. We are something far older, far hungrier." That's when I noticed Sarah was holding something behind her back, a flare gun from the emergency kit. She was planning something desperate, and I needed to be ready to help her. "You're just animals," Sarah continued, taking another step closer to the alpha. "Smart animals, maybe, but still just animals. My mom has faced down hundreds of bears. What makes you think you're any different?" The creature's red eyes blazed with anger. "We are different because we choose to be cruel. Because we enjoy the fear in your eyes. Because we kill for pleasure, not just hunger." It leaned down until its massive head was inches from Sarah's face. "Your mother may know bears, but she knows nothing about us." Sarah smiled. "Maybe not, but she knows about explosives." Before I could figure out what she meant, Sarah fired the flare directly into the creature's face and dove sideways toward the rocks. The alpha roared in pain and rage, clawing at its eyes as the burning magnesium seared its vision. That's when I understood. Sarah had noticed the same thing I had. We were camping right below the avalanche control area. The Park Service kept explosive charges positioned along the canyon walls to trigger controlled avalanches during dangerous weather conditions. Sarah was telling me to bring the mountain down. The other creatures were rushing toward the campsite now, abandoning their careful positioning to help their injured leader. I had maybe 10 seconds before they reached the kids. I ran toward the rocky slope where the charges were hidden, praying I could remember the emergency detonation procedure. The explosives were designed to be triggered remotely, but there was a manual backup system for emergencies. This definitely qualified. Behind me, I could hear snarling and screaming as the creatures closed in on the campsite. Sarah was shouting instructions to the other kids, trying to get them to take cover behind the larger rocks. But there wasn't enough shelter, and the pack was moving too fast. I found the first charge hidden behind a boulder, 50 feet up the canyon wall. The manual trigger was a simple pull cord system, designed so a ranger could set it off, even in a panic. I grabbed the cord and looked back down at the campsite. Sarah and the other kids were huddled behind the fire pit, but the creatures were circling them like sharks. The alpha was still clawing at its burned face, but the others were preparing to attack. I could see their muscles bunching as they got ready to leap. If I pulled this cord, the entire canyon wall would come down. The avalanche would bury everything below, the creatures, but also Sarah and the other kids. I'd be trading their lives for the certainty that these monsters wouldn't escape to kill others. "Mom," Sarah shouted across the distance. She could see where I was, could see what I was planning. "Do it. Don't let them get out." The largest of the pack members was crouching to jump. In another second, it would be on top of my daughter. I pulled the cord. The first explosion was like a thunderclap that shook the entire mountain. Rock and ice began tumbling down the canyon walls in a roar that drowned out everything else. I could see massive boulders bouncing down the slope like toys, gathering speed as they fell. But the creatures were faster than I'd expected. Even blinded, the alpha was moving toward higher ground with supernatural speed. Two others were already scrambling up the opposite canyon wall, their claws finding purchase on rock faces that should have been unclimbable. I ran toward the second charge position, desperate to bring down enough of the mountain to trap them all. But my limp was slowing me down, and the loose rock was treacherous under my boots. The avalanche hit the campsite like a tsunami of stone and ice. I could see Sarah and the other kids disappearing under the cascade, but I could also see 3 of the creatures escaping upward, climbing faster than the falling rocks could follow them. The second explosive charge was 30 feet further up the slope. I could hear the surviving creatures howling in rage as they realized what was happening, but they weren't trying to escape anymore. They were coming for me. I reached the second trigger just as claws raked across my back, tearing through my jacket and into flesh. The pain was incredible, but I managed to grab the pull cord before the creature could strike again. The second explosion was even larger than the first. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet as the entire canyon wall began to collapse. Everything was falling now: rocks, trees, ice, and me, along with it all. As I tumbled down with the avalanche, I could see Sarah's face emerging from behind a boulder that had sheltered her from the worst of the rockfall. She was alive. Hurt, maybe, but alive. That was all that mattered. The last thing I saw before the rocks buried me was the alpha creature, still partially blinded, but struggling toward the surface. It looked directly at me as we both disappeared under the cascade, and I could have sworn I saw recognition in those red eyes. It knew what I'd done, and it knew why. Sarah found me 3 hours later, after the avalanche had settled and the storm had passed. I was pinned under a boulder, my legs crushed, and my radio somehow still working despite everything. The other kids were mostly okay, bruised and terrified, but alive. "Mom, help is coming," Sarah said, though we both knew it was too late for help. I got through to the ranger station. They're sending helicopters. "How many of them got out?" I asked. Sarah's face went pale. 2, I think, maybe 3. They disappeared up the north face when the rocks stopped falling. So we hadn't killed them all. Some of the pack had escaped, and they'd be angry now. Hungry for revenge. The mountains weren't safe anymore, might never be safe again. "Sarah, listen to me," I said, fighting to stay conscious long enough to tell her what she needed to know. "Those things aren't bears, they're something else, something old and smart and vicious. The officials won't believe what really happened here. They'll say it was a normal bear attack or an avalanche accident." "I know, Mom. But I saw them too. I'll remember." "You have to make people understand," I continued, though my voice was getting weaker. "These mountains need to be evacuated. The pack will rebuild their numbers, and they'll come back." They said this was their territory, and they meant it. Sarah held my hand as the feeling in my legs faded away completely. "I'll tell them. I'll make them listen." But I knew she wouldn't be able to convince anyone. Who would believe a 16-year-old girl's story about intelligent monsters wearing bear shapes? The official report would blame everything on a rogue grizzly, maybe 2 of them. The missing hunters would be listed as bear attack victims. The dead teacher would be tragic collateral damage. By the time the rescue helicopters arrived, I was barely conscious. They airlifted Sarah and the other survivors to Anchorage, and according to the medical reports, I died from internal injuries during the flight to the hospital. But that's not the end of the story. Sarah kept her promise. She spent the next 40 years trying to warn people about what was really hunting in the Katmai wilderness. She became a park ranger herself, following in my footsteps, and she documented every suspicious death and disappearance in the region. The attacks continued, but they were spread out over time and distance to avoid detection. A missing hiker here, a hunting accident there, always with just enough normal bear sign to fool the investigators. The creatures had learned to be more careful, more strategic. Sarah retired last year, but she still monitors the area. She's trained her own daughter to watch for the signs, to recognize the difference between normal predator behavior and something much worse. The knowledge passes from mother to daughter, ranger to ranger, because someone has to remember the truth. And sometimes, on clear October nights when the wind carries scents from the backcountry, Sarah still catches a whiff of that impossible musk, bear smell mixed with something ancient and hungry. She knows they're still out there, still claiming the mountains as their territory, still waiting for the day when people forget to be afraid. The pack of Katmai endures, and they have all the time in the world. My name is Marcus Shadowhunter, and I need to tell you what happened to me in the summer of 1954. I was a park ranger then, stationed alone in the most remote section of Wrangell Street, Elias National Park in Alaska. What I experienced there changed everything I thought I knew about life and death. I chose that assignment on purpose. After the war, after 3 years in a Japanese prison camp, I couldn't stand being around people anymore. The nightmares, the jumping at every sound, the way my hands shook when someone got too close. I was broken, and I knew it. So when they offered me a solo posting managing 50 square miles of wilderness, I jumped at the chance. The cabin sat in a valley, surrounded by mountains that scraped the sky. The nearest human being was 40 miles away, perfect for a man who'd forgotten how to live with others. I had my routine, and routine was everything. Up at dawn, check the weather station, patrol the trails, mark animal sightings in my logbook, radio check-in every Sunday at noon just to prove I was still alive. The rest of the time, blessed silence. My left hand was missing 3 fingers, courtesy of a guard's boot in the camp. Shrapnel scars covered my back like a roadmap of pain. But out here, none of that mattered. The mountains didn't care about my nightmares. The trees didn't flinch when I limped past. For 3 months, it worked. I slept through whole nights for the first time in years. The knot in my chest started to loosen. I began to think maybe I could heal after all. The cabin was simple. 1 room, a stone fireplace, shelves lined with supplies and books. On the mantel sat a photograph from before the war, me in uniform with the other boys from my unit. Most of them never made it home. Sometimes I'd catch myself talking to their faces in the photo, telling them about my day, asking their advice. My wife had left while I was overseas. Couldn't blame her. She'd married 1 man and a ghost came back. My kids barely knew me. Better this way, I told myself. They were safer without their broken father lurking around, jumping at car backfires and yelling in his sleep. The work suited me. I knew how to track, how to hunt, how to live off the land. The army had taught me that much before the Japs caught us in the Philippines. Out here, those skills mattered. I could disappear into these mountains and never need another human being again. That's what I thought anyway. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday evening in late June. I was doing my usual radio check, not the official Sunday call, just testing the equipment like I did every few days. Static crackled through the speaker, then cleared to reveal a voice reading the weather report. But underneath the announcer's voice, I heard something else. Whispers, faint, like wind through leaves, but definitely human, speaking a mix of English and Japanese. Marcus-san, the voice said. Marcus-san, why did 2000 you leave us? My blood turned to ice. I clicked off the radio and sat staring at it for 10 minutes before turning it back on. Normal weather report. No whispers, just the wind, I told myself. Just my mind playing tricks. The isolation was getting to me faster than I'd expected, but deep down, I knew that voice. Knew it from the darkest days of my life, when men died around me like flies, and I somehow kept breathing. The voice belonged to Tommy Nakamura, a Japanese-American soldier who died in my arms in the prison camp, shot trying to escape in the winter of 1943. Tommy Nakamura had been dead for 11 years. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been a dream. PTSD playing tricks, my mind mixing up memories with reality. I'd heard stranger things from other veterans at the hospital. Nothing to worry about as long as I stayed on my medications. But when I went outside to check the weather station, I found something that made my stomach drop. Japanese. Characters carved into the bark of the pine tree next to my cabin. Fresh cuts, sap still oozing. The characters spelled out words I recognized from the camp. Hungry. Cold. Why? I'd walked past that tree every morning for 3 months. Those marks hadn't been there yesterday. My hands started shaking as I traced the cuts with my remaining fingers. The carving was deep, deliberate. Not something an animal could do, not something that happened naturally. I spent the morning searching the area for footprints, broken branches, any sign of an intruder. Nothing. The ground around the cabin was soft from recent rain. Any human would have left tracks. But the pine needles lay undisturbed. That afternoon, the temperature in my cabin dropped 20 degrees in the span of 5 minutes. No wind, no clouds, the sun still shining bright through the windows. But my breath began to fog, and ice crystals formed on the inside of my coffee cup. The cold moved through the room like something alive, flowing around furniture, pooling in corners. I threw another log on the fire, but the flames barely helped. The cold seemed to come from somewhere else entirely. Then I heard the tapping, soft at first, like fingers drumming on wood, coming from the walls, moving from room to room. I pressed my ear against the logs, but the sound stayed just out of reach, always one step ahead of me. "Who's there?" I called out. The tapping stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard breathing that wasn't mine. That night, I moved my chair to face the door and sat with my rifle across my knees. Didn't sleep a wink. Every few hours, I'd hear movement outside, footsteps circling the cabin, stopping at the windows, testing the door handle. But when dawn came, and I finally worked up the courage to look outside, the snow around my cabin was unmarked except for my own boot prints from the day before. On Thursday, things got worse. I was updating my logbook when I noticed something strange. My handwriting had changed. The entries for the past 3 days were written in my hand, but mixed with Japanese characters I didn't remember writing. The English words described normal ranger activities, checking trails, monitoring weather, cataloging wildlife. But the Japanese characters told a different story. They spoke of hunger, of cold, of watching friends die while I did nothing to help. I stared at the page until my eyes burned. I had no memory of writing those words. I barely remembered enough Japanese to read them, let alone write them. But there they were, in my own handwriting, accusing me of things I'd tried to forget. That evening, I skipped my radio check. Couldn't risk hearing those voices again. Instead, I sat by the fire and tried to make sense of what was happening. Stress, that's all. The isolation was breaking me down faster than expected. I'd heard of soldiers having delayed reactions to trauma, symptoms showing up years later. But when I went to bed, I found my pillow arranged differently. Not just moved, arranged. Positioned the exact way we'd been forced to sleep in the prison camp, with our heads pointing toward the guard tower. And on my pillow was a single grain of rice. The kind of rice they'd fed us in the camp, moldy, crawling with weevils, barely enough to keep a man alive. I hadn't seen rice like that in over 10 years, but I knew the taste, the smell, the way it felt like sand between your teeth when you were desperate enough to eat anything. I picked up the grain with trembling fingers, real rice, real as the tears running down my face. "Tommy," I whispered to the empty room, "is that you?" The wind outside my cabin suddenly stopped. The night went completely silent, like the world was holding its breath. Then, clear as day, I heard his voice. "You left us, Marcus-san. You left us all behind." Friday morning brought the first visual contact. I was splitting wood behind the cabin when I caught movement in my peripheral vision. A figure standing at the edge of the tree line, maybe 50 yards away. Thin as a rail, wearing the tattered remains of an army uniform, I dropped my axe and squinted through the morning mist. The figure raised one skeletal hand in what might have been a wave. It was Tommy Nakamura, but not as I remembered him from before the camp. This was Tommy, as he'd looked at the end, hollow cheeks, skin stretched tight over bones, eyes sunk deep in their sockets, the way he'd looked when the guard shot him down in the snow. "Tommy!" I called out. The figure took a step toward me, then another. With each step, he became more translucent, like fog taking human shape. By the time he'd covered half the distance, I could see trees through his body. He stopped 10 feet away, close enough that I could see the bullet holes in his chest, dark stains that hadn't faded in 11 years. "You promised," he said, his voice like wind through dry leaves. "You promised you'd tell them what happened here." "I tried," I whispered. Nobody wanted to hear it. They just wanted to forget. "You forgot too." His eyes, black holes in a gray face, fixed on mine. "You forgot us, forgot what you did to survive." I had to survive. I had to make it home. "At what cost, Marcus-san? At what cost?" Before I could answer, he was gone, vanished like smoke, leaving only the smell of death and the memory of his accusation. That's when the others started coming. Over the next week, they appeared one by one. Men I'd known in the camp, men I'd watched die, men I'd failed to save. each one looking exactly as they had at the moment of death, beaten, starved, broken. Rodriguez, who died of dysentery while I hoarded medicine I'd stolen from the guards. Chen, who'd frozen to death while I slept, wrapped in a blanket I'd traded for information about escape plans. Morrison, who'd been executed for stealing food that I'd actually taken. They came to me in dreams, in reflections, in the smoke from my fire. They stood in my peripheral vision during the day and whispered my name at night. Each one with the same question: why did you survive when we didn't? I stopped eating. Food tasted like ash in my mouth. When I tried to sleep, I felt their hands on me, pulling at my clothes, trying to drag me down to wherever the dead go when they can't rest. My radio calls became increasingly frantic. I reported equipment failures, medical emergencies, anything to get someone to come check on me, but headquarters was understaffed and overwhelmed. They told me to tough it out until my replacement arrived in August. By the second week of July, I couldn't tell what was real anymore. The cabin had transformed. During the worst episodes, the walls became bamboo slats. My comfortable bed turned into a thin mat on a concrete floor. The stone fireplace became a bucket where we dumped our waste. The smell of decay and unwashed bodies filled every breath. I'd look up from my logbook to find myself writing in the dirt with a stick, scratching out the names of the dead over and over again. I'd reach for food and find only a handful of moldy rice crawling with insects. The worst part was the accuracy of their memories, details I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten them myself. Things I'd never told anyone, not the doctors, not my wife, not even the chaplain who'd tried to help me process what I'd experienced. They knew about the deals I'd made, the small betrayals that had kept me alive while better men died, the information I'd traded, the food I'd stolen, the times I'd looked the other way when someone needed help. They knew because they'd been there. They'd watched me choose my survival over their lives, again and again. And now they wanted an accounting. You owe us, Chen whispered from the shadows by my door. You owe us our stories. You owe us our names, Morrison added from his position by the window. You owe us the truth, Tommy said, materializing in the chair across from me. The truth about what kind of man survives when heroes die. I tried to argue with them, tried to justify my choices. War made monsters of everyone. I'd done what I had to do. Survival wasn't a crime. But their hollow eyes saw through every excuse, because deep down, I knew they were right. The confrontation came on July 15th, during the worst thunderstorm I'd ever seen in Alaska. I huddled in my cabin while lightning split the sky and rain hammered the roof like machine gun fire. The storm had been building all day, turning the sky black as midnight at 3 in the afternoon. That's when they all came at once. Not just Tommy, Chen, Rodriguez, and Morrison, all of them. Every man who died in that camp while I survived. They filled my cabin like smoke, dozens of translucent figures, standing shoulder to shoulder, their eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my bones ache. At their center stood Colonel Hartwell, the ranking officer who died protecting the rest of us during a guard beating. A good man, a better man than me. Marcus Shadowhunter, he said, his voice carrying the authority it had held in life. You stand accused of betrayal, cowardice, and the murder of your brothers in arms. Murder? I gasped. I never killed anyone in the camp. You killed them with silence, Chen interrupted. You killed Rodriguez when you let him take the blame for food you stole. You killed Morrison when you told the guards about his escape tunnel, another voice added. You killed all of us, Tommy said sadly, by choosing to forget we ever existed. They began to recite the charges. Each small betrayal, each selfish choice, each moment when I'd saved myself at someone else's expense. And with each accusation, I felt pieces of myself crumbling away. Because it was all true. I'd survived by becoming something less than human. I'd made deals with guards, traded information for food, positioned myself as useful while other men became expendable. I'd watched good soldiers die while I found ways to make myself indispensable. But I tried to help sometimes, I whispered. I saved Thompson when he got sick. I shared my rations with Williams. Too little, Colonel Hartwell said. Too late. The storm outside reached a crescendo, and suddenly, I wasn't in my cabin anymore. I was back in the camp, feeling the bamboo walls around me, smelling the stench of disease and despair. But now I was seeing it through their eyes, watching myself make the choices that had kept me alive while they suffered and died. I saw myself reporting Morrison's escape plans to the guards, watched myself steal medicine from Rodriguez's hiding place, relived the moment I'd stepped back and let Tommy take a beating meant for both of us. Each memory hit like a physical blow, forcing me to my knees on the cabin floor. "Why?" I sobbed. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you need to remember," Tommy said, kneeling beside me. "Not just the guilt, Marcus-san. The whole truth." And then they showed me something else. The time I'd carried sick men to the medical hut when I could have left them to die. The night I'd given my only blanket to Thompson, knowing I'd probably freeze. The day I'd thrown myself between a guard and Williams, taking a beating that nearly killed me. They showed me the food I'd shared when I had nothing to spare. The times I'd volunteered for extra work to keep weaker men out of the punishment detail. The escape plan I'd sabotaged not to save myself, but because I knew it would get everyone involved killed. "You weren't just a survivor," Colonel Hartwell said quietly. "You were also a man trying to stay human in an inhuman place." "But the things I did were necessary," Rodriguez said, his voice softer now. "Some of them, others were just human weakness. We all had moments of weakness, Marcus. The difference is, we died with ours. You had to live with yours." I looked around at their faces, not accusatory now, but sad, tired, ready for something I couldn't give them. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Tommy reached out with a translucent hand that I could almost feel. "We want to be remembered, not as victims, not as heroes. As men who lived and died and deserved better than silence." "Tell our stories," Chen said. "Tell them who we were. Tell them what it cost to survive," Morrison added. "And tell them," Colonel Hartwell said, "that some prices are worth paying and some aren't. Let them decide which is which." The storm outside began to fade, and with it, the overwhelming presence of the dead. One by one, they started to disappear, becoming wisps of memory and shadow. Tommy was the last to go. "Will you do it, Marcus-san? Will you tell?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I'll tell them." He smiled then. The first time I'd seen him smile since he died in my arms 11 years ago. "Then we can rest." And just like that, I was alone again. The replacement ranger found me 3 weeks later, sitting at my kitchen table with a stack of notebooks filled with stories. Stories about men who died in a Japanese prison camp while I survived. Every name, every face, every moment of courage and weakness and ordinary human struggle. I'd stopped eating days before, but I kept writing. Had to get it all down while I could still remember their voices, their faces, the way Tommy had smiled at the end. The ranger, a young fellow named Peterson, took one look at me and called for a medical evacuation. Dehydration, exhaustion, severe malnutrition. They flew me to a hospital in Anchorage, where doctors tried to figure out how I'd survived 3 weeks without food. I told them about the dead men, who'd kept me company. The nurses exchanged glances and added psychological evaluation to my chart. But I had the stories. 4 notebooks, filled cover to cover, with everything I could remember about the men I'd served with and failed and saved and lost. Their names, their hometowns, their dreams, their fears, the way Rodriguez sang Spanish lullabies when he thought no one was listening, how Chen had carried a photo of his daughter until the day it dissolved in the rain. The jokes Morrison told to keep our spirits up, even when we were all dying by degrees. I spent the next 6 months in that hospital, getting my strength back and turning those notebooks into something readable. The doctors said I was recovering from a severe psychotic break brought on by isolation and trauma. Maybe they were right, but when the book was published the following year, The Men Who Didn't Come Home, A Survivor's Account of Bataan, the family started writing to me. Rodriguez's wife, who'd never known how her husband died, Chen's daughter, who barely remembered her father but treasured every detail I could give her about his last years. Morrison's parents, who'd spent a decade wondering if their son had suffered. They thanked me for remembering, for telling the truth about what survival cost and what it was worth. I never went back to Alaska. Couldn't handle the isolation anymore, and didn't need to. The ghosts had quieted down once their stories were told. "Oh, I still see them sometimes," Tommy in the corner of my eye, Rodriguez in an old photograph, Chen in the face of his daughter when she visits. But they're not angry anymore. They're not trapped. Neither am I. I live in a small apartment in Seattle now, near the Veterans Hospital where I volunteer on weekends. I tell the younger veterans about the war, about survival, about the price of living when good men die. Some of them think I'm crazy. Maybe I am. But I sleep through the night now, and my dreams are full of living voices instead of dead ones. Last week, I got a letter from a soldier just back from Korea. He'd read my book and wanted to talk about the choices he'd made over there, the guilt he was carrying, the friends he'd lost. How do you live with it? He asked. How do you keep going when you know you survived because others didn't? I wrote back and told him what Tommy and the others had taught me in that cabin in Alaska. You honor the dead by living well. You carry their stories so they're not forgotten. And you remember that survival isn't a sin, it's a responsibility. Some prices are worth paying, and some aren't. The trick is learning to tell the difference. My name is Diana Moonriver, and I should have listened to my father's warnings before he died. I never thought I'd be back in Glacier Bay, living in the same small ranger cabin where I grew up. The place still smells like coffee and old books, just like when Dad was alive. My twin daughters, Emma and Sophie, love it here. They're 8 years old, and think living in a national park is like having the world's biggest backyard. Mom, can we go see the ice again? Emma asks, pressing her face against the kitchen window. Outside, the bay stretches wide and gray under the September sky. Chunks of ice float like white islands in the dark water. After I finish these reports, I tell her. And we stay on the shore, no getting close to the water. Sophie looks up from her coloring book. Why can't we go swimming? The water's too cold, sweetie. It could hurt you. I don't tell them the real reason. I don't tell them about the strange ice shapes I've been seeing near the bowl. Sure, shapes that look almost like children playing in the water. I don't tell them about Dad's journals, hidden in his old desk, filled with weird drawings and words I can't understand. Being a ranger here was supposed to be simple. I have a marine biology degree and years of experience with water safety. I know how to read ice conditions and handle emergencies. What I don't know is why Dad seemed so scared during his last few months alive. Your family has duties here, he told me right before the heart attack took him. Important duties. The journals will explain everything. But the journals don't explain anything. They're full of crazy stories about ice children and ancient promises. Dad wrote about feeding rituals and something called the price that must be paid. I thought the isolation had finally gotten to him. Rangers who spend too much time alone sometimes start imagining things. Now I'm starting to wonder if he was imagining things at all. This morning, I found new ice formations on the beach. Perfect little shapes that looked exactly like children holding hands. The weird part? It's been too warm for ice to form naturally. The bay should be mostly ice-free this time of year. Mom, look, Sophie points outside. The ice children are back. My blood goes cold. What did you say? The ice children. Emma and I see them sometimes. They wave at us from the water. Emma nods eagerly. They want us to come play with them. They look lonely. I kneel down between my daughters, trying to keep my voice calm. Listen to me very carefully. You must never, ever go near those ice shapes. They're dangerous. Promise me. Both girls promise, but I can see the confusion in their eyes. They don't understand why their mom suddenly looks so scared. That night, after the girls are asleep, I pull out Dad's journals again. I flip through pages of his messy handwriting, looking for anything that makes sense. Most of it reads like the ravings of a crazy person. But one entry stops me cold. Asterisk. September 15th. The ice children are forming earlier this year. Diana doesn't believe me yet, but she will. The twins are the right age now. Emma especially seems drawn to them. I've tried to break the pattern, but some promises can't be broken. The Moonriver family has protected this place for 3 generations, and we've paid the price every time. Now it's Diana's turn to choose. Asterisk, I slam the journal shut. Dad was sick. He had to be sick. There's no such thing as ice children, and there's no family curse. I'm a scientist, and scientists deal with facts. But outside my window, I swear I can hear children laughing. The next morning, I find Emma standing by the shore in her pajamas. She's sleepwalking again, something she's done since her father and I divorced last year. Usually, she just wanders around the cabin. I've never found her outside before, and definitely not this close to the water. Emma, honey, wake up. I touch her shoulder gently. Her skin feels ice cold. She turns to me with blank eyes. They're calling me, Mommy. The children want me to come play. What children, sweetheart? She points to the water. About 20 feet from shore, I see them clearly for the first time. 5 small figures made of ice, standing in the shallow water. They look like children, perfectly formed, with faces that seem almost real. As I watch, one of them raises a tiny ice hand and waves. I grab Emma and back away from the shore. We're going inside, right now. But they're my friends, Emma protests, as I carry her toward the cabin. They told me their names, Sarah and Billy, and no more talking about ice children, I say firmly. They're just ice. They're not real. But even as I say it, I can't shake what I saw. Those weren't random ice formations. They had faces, they moved. I spend the morning on the radio, calling other rangers in the area. Nobody else has reported unusual ice formations. The Weather Service confirms what I already know. Temperatures haven't been cold enough for natural ice formation. When I hang up, Sophie tugs on my sleeve. Mom, Emma's acting weird. I find Emma in her bedroom, sitting on the floor and drawing. She's always been artistic, but this is different. She's drawn the bay with incredible detail. Detail an 8-year-old shouldn't be able to manage. And in the water, she's drawn dozens of small figures. These are all your ice friends? I ask, trying to sound casual. Emma nods without looking up. There used to be more, but some went away. Grandpa Moonriver helped them go away. My heart pounds. Emma never met my grandfather. He disappeared when I was just a baby. How do you know about Grandpa Moonriver? The ice children told me. They said he was nice to them. He brought them what they needed. What did they need, Emma? She finally looks up at me, and for a moment, her eyes look older than they should. Someone to stay with them forever. So, they won't be lonely anymore. That afternoon, I take both girls to the visitor center, hoping some normal activity will help. The center is mostly empty. Tourist season is winding down, and most families with children left weeks ago. We're looking at a display about glacier formation when I hear a scream from outside. Through the window, I see a man running from the parking lot. He's shouting something about children in the water. I tell my girls to stay inside and run out to help. The man is David Chen, a photographer who's been camping in the park for a week. He's normally calm and professional, but now he's shaking. There were children in the bay, he gasps. 5 or 6 of them, standing in the water like they were frozen. I went to help them, but when I got close, he stops, struggling for words. What happened? They weren't children, they were made of ice. But they moved like press, they were alive. One of them reached for me, and I swear its hand felt real, cold as death, but real. I helped David back to the visitor center. But my mind is racing. This is the first time someone else has seen the ice children. Whatever's happening, it's not just in my family's imagination. That evening, I find Emma standing at her bedroom window, talking quietly to someone. When I listen closely, I realize she's having a conversation, asking questions, and waiting for answers. Emma, who are you talking to? Sarah, she says simply. She's right outside. She says her mommy and daddy went away a long time ago, and she's been waiting for someone to play with. I look out the window. There's nothing there but darkness and the distant sound of water lapping against the shore. I don't see anyone, sweetheart. She says you can't see her yet, but you will soon. She says all the mommies can see them eventually. A chill runs down my spine. What else does Sarah say? Emma tilts her head, listening to something I can't hear. She says it's almost time. She says, Grandpa Moonriver promised, and promises can't be broken. I pull Emma away from the window and tuck her into bed, but sleep doesn't come easily. Outside, I can hear something that sounds like children playing, laughing and calling to each other across the water. When I look out, there's nothing there. But the sounds continue all night long. The ice children are getting stronger. Over the next 3 days, they appear more often and stay visible longer. Other park visitors start reporting them. An elderly couple from Seattle swears they saw a group of children playing in the water, but when they went to investigate, the children vanished. A solo hiker found perfect ice sculptures of children on the beach, sculptures that melted away while he watched. I start carrying a camera, hoping to get proof of what we're seeing. But every photo comes out blurred or empty, showing only gray water where the ice children should be. The girls are changing too. Emma talks to her friends every night now, holding long conversations by the window. Sophie has started sleepwalking as well, and twice I've found both of them standing by the shore in the middle of the night. They want us to come play, Sophie explains when I ask her about it. They say it's fun in the cold water. You can't go in the water, I tell them again and again. Promise me you won't go in the water. They promise, but their promises feel empty. They're 8 years old, and they don't understand danger the way adults do. Especially danger that looks like playmates. On the 4th day, everything changes. I'm doing maintenance on the dock when I hear Emma scream. I run toward the sound and find her standing waist-deep in the bay, surrounded by the ice children. They're clearer now, more solid-looking. I can see their faces distinctly, pale, perfect, and utterly inhuman. Emma, I shout, running into the water. The cold hits me like a physical blow, but I keep going. Emma, come here now. She doesn't move. She's staring at the ice children with a dreamy expression. One of them, a girl about Emma's age, reaches out and takes Emma's hand. Where they touch, I can see frost spreading across Emma's skin. Come play with us, the ice girl says in a voice like wind through icicles. Come stay with us forever. I grab Emma and pull her toward shore. The moment I touch her, the ice children hiss and step back. Their faces change, becoming angry and desperate. She belongs to us, another ice child says. The promise must be kept. Stay away from my daughter, I shout, dragging Emma out of the water. The ice children follow us to the water's edge but can't seem to leave the bay. They stand there watching as I carry Emma to the cabin. Their eyes never blink, and their mouths never stop moving, as if they're chanting. Something I can't hear. Emma is hypothermic when I get her inside. Her lips are blue and she's shivering uncontrollably. I wrap her in blankets and call for a medical evacuation, but the helicopter can't land due to sudden fog that rolled in from nowhere. I was just talking to them, Emma says through chattering teeth. They seemed so sad, Mom. They've been waiting such a long time. Waiting for what? For someone to stay with them. They say they're cold and lonely, and they need a friend. They said Grandpa Moonriver promised them a friend from our family. I spend the rest of the day researching my family's history in the park records. What I find makes my hands shake. My grandfather, Robert Moonriver, disappeared in September 1949. The official report says he drowned while conducting a routine patrol, but his body was never found. My father started working in the park in September 1969, exactly 20 years later. He stayed for 40 years until his death, this past spring. And now I'm here with my daughters in September 1989, exactly 40 years after my grandfather disappeared. That night, I finally understand what Dad meant about family duties. I find a hidden section in his desk, one I missed before. Inside are older journals, dating back to my great-grandfather. The writing is faded, but the message is clear. Asterisk. The ice children are the spirits of Tlingit children who died in a glacier collapse 200 years ago. They're trapped between life and death, growing stronger and more desperate with each passing year. Our family made a deal with them long ago. We protect their resting place, and in exchange, they spare the coastal communities from an eternal ice age. Asterisk, but the spirits require payment. Every generation, they choose one Moonriver child to join them. The child doesn't die. They become a guardian spirit, keeping the ice children calm and controlled. Asterisk. My father gave them my brother Thomas in 1909. I'll give them Robert in 1949. Robert will give them his child when the time comes. Asterisk. The journal ends there, but the implications are clear. Dad was supposed to give them one of his children. Instead, he waited until he was old and tried to break the cycle. Now the ice children are angry and growing stronger, and they've chosen Emma to settle the debt. I look out the window and see them clearly. Dozens of ice children standing in the bay, all looking toward our cabin. They're not playing anymore. They're waiting, and they're getting closer to shore. The next morning, I wake up to find Sophie's bed empty. I run outside and see her walking toward the water like a sleepwalker. But she's not alone. Emma is with her, and they're holding hands. Behind them, ice has formed a bridge from the shore to deeper water. A bridge that shouldn't exist in the warm morning air. Sophie, Emma, stop, I scream, running after them. They don't respond. They step onto the ice, bridge together, and I can see the ice children rising from the water to greet them. The children look more solid now, more real. Some of them are dressed in old-fashioned clothes from different time periods. One boy wears a sailor suit from the 1940s. A girl has a dress that looks like it's from the early 1900s. I realize these aren't just any ice children. These are all the children who were given to the spirits over the years. All the Moon River family members who paid the price to keep the ancient agreement. Girls, please, I shout, stepping onto the ice bridge. It holds my weight, but barely. I can feel it groaning under me. The ice children turn to look at me. Their leader, a boy who looks about 12, steps forward. His face is familiar, and with a shock, I realize why. He looks exactly like the old photographs of my grandfather. Grandfather Robert? I whisper. He nods slowly. Hello, Diana. We've been waiting for you to understand. You're supposed to be dead. I'm not dead. I'm something else now. Something between. His voice sounds like my grandfather's voice, but hollow and cold. I've been protecting this place for 40 years, keeping the angry spirits calm. But I'm tired, Diana. So very tired. Let my daughters go. They're just children. So was I, Robert says sadly. So were all of us. But someone must stay, Diana. Someone must keep the balance. If we're not fed, if we don't have a guardian from your family, we'll grow beyond control. The ice will spread across the entire coast. Millions will die in the new ice age. Around us, the other ice children start to chant in a language I don't recognize. The air grows colder, and I can see my breath in white puffs. There has to be another way, I say desperately. There is, Robert says. You could take their place yourself, become the guardian instead of them. But that would mean leaving Emma and Sophie orphaned, just like you were orphaned. I look at my daughters. They're standing among the ice children now, and frost is starting to form on their clothes. Their eyes are glassy and distant, like they're hypnotized. If I become the guardian, I ask, will they be free? Will they be safe? They'll live normal lives? Robert promises. But you'll be bound to this place forever. You'll become like us, not dead, but not truly alive either. And you'll be responsible for maintaining the balance until the next generation comes. It's not really a choice at all. I can't let my daughters become eternal prisoners of ice and cold. And I can't let millions of people die because I was too selfish to make the sacrifice. I'll do it, I say. Take me instead. Robert nods gravely. Are you certain? Once the transformation begins, it can't be stopped. I'm certain. The ice children begin to sing, a haunting melody that seems to come from the heart of winter itself. The cold spreads through my body, starting at my feet and moving upward. It should hurt, but it doesn't. Instead, I feel a strange sense of peace, like I'm finally understanding my true purpose. Emma and Sophie suddenly blink and look around in confusion. The glassy look leaves their eyes, and they see me standing among the ice children. Mom, Emma cries, trying to run toward me. But the ice bridge between us starts to crack and crumble. It's okay, I tell them, even as the cold reaches my heart. I love you both so much. Be good for Aunt Sarah, okay? Mom, no! Sophie screams, reaching for me. But I'm already changing. I can feel my human warmth leaving, replaced by something older and stronger. I'm becoming a bridge between the world of the living and the realm of eternal winter. The last thing I see as myself is my daughters being pulled to safety by park rangers who finally arrived. The last thing I hear is their voices calling my name. Then I become something else. I am still Diana Moonriver, but I am also something more now. I exist in the space between ice and water, between the living world and the spirit realm. My body is cold as winter, but my mind remains clear. I can see things I never saw before, the delicate balance that keeps the natural world functioning, the ancient agreements that prevent chaos, the thin line between safety and catastrophe. Emma and Sophie were taken to live with my sister in Seattle, just as we planned. They visit every summer, and I watch them from beneath the water. They can see me sometimes, a pale figure waving from the depths of the bay. They wave back, but they don't try to reach me anymore. They understand now that some distances can't be crossed. The ice children are peaceful now. With me as their guardian, they don't need to hunt for new companions. They play in the deeper waters, far from shore. And I make sure they don't frighten the tourists. Sometimes, I tell them stories about the world above. And they tell me stories about the world below. My grandfather Robert was finally able to rest. The night after my transformation, he simply smiled and faded away like morning mist. He'd kept his vigil for 40 years, longer than anyone should have to carry such a burden. The park is safe now. Glacier Bay continues to be one of the most beautiful places on Earth, and visitors come from around the world to see its pristine wilderness. They don't know that beneath the surface, ancient spirits keep the balance between ice and warmth, between order and chaos. I've been here for 2 years now, and I'm learning my duties. I can feel when the balance shifts, when the ice children grow restless, when the ancient agreements need tending. It's lonely work, but important work. The alternative, an endless winter that would destroy the world my daughters live in, is unthinkable. Sometimes, late at night, when the bay is empty of boats, I rise to the surface and look up at the stars. I think about Emma and Sophie growing up in the city. Emma wants to be a marine biologist like her mom. Sophie wants to be a teacher. They have normal lives now, birthday parties and school plays and sleepovers with friends. They don't have to carry the family curse anymore. I made sure of that. But I also made sure they know their heritage. When they're older, when they have children of their own, they'll need to understand what happened here. They'll need to teach their children to respect the old places. The wild places, the places where ancient agreements still hold power. Because this isn't the only place where such bargains exist. The world is full of thin spots, where the supernatural bleeds through. Most people never see them, never know they exist, but some families like ours, are called to stand guard. Emma and Sophie won't have to pay the price I paid. But they'll need to remember the stories. They'll need to pass them down to their children, so that future generations will know why some places must be protected, why some promises must be kept, and why some sacrifices ensure that the world continues to turn. In the distance, I hear the ice children laughing as they play in the deep water. It's not a threatening sound anymore. It's the sound of contentment, of spirits finally at peace. And beneath the waves of Glacier Bay, I smile and settle in for my eternal watch. My name is Jack Thornfield, and I've been a park ranger for 25 years. I'm telling you this story because someone needs to know what really happened out there in the Chugach National Forest during November of 1967. Most folks won't believe it, but I'm hoping you will. I was 52 then, getting close to retirement. My wife Sarah had died from cancer 2 years before, and my kids had grown up and moved away. The house felt too quiet, too empty. That's why I volunteered for the winter cabin checks that year. 3 weeks alone in the wilderness sounded better than 3 weeks rattling around that empty house. The job was simple enough. Every winter, we had to check on 15 remote hunting cabins scattered across the forest. Make sure they were secure, repair any damage, and ensure they'd be ready for the spring hunting season. Most rangers hated the assignment. It meant weeks of cold, dangerous travel by snowmobile, sleeping in freezing cabins, and eating canned food. But I didn't mind. The quiet helped me think. I wasn't in the best shape for the job, I'll admit. Too many years of Sarah's good cooking had left me carrying extra weight around my middle. I had diabetes and high blood pressure, took pills for both. My knees creaked in the cold, and I got winded easier than I used to. But I knew those woods better than anyone, and my supervisor trusted me to get the job done. The weather report looked nasty when I set out that Monday morning. A storm system was moving in from the north, bringing temperatures that could drop to 50 below. I loaded my snowmobile with extra fuel, medical supplies, including my insulin, emergency food, and my hunting rifle. The radio equipment was the most important. I was supposed to check in every 48 hours. The first few days went smooth as butter. I reached Cabin 1 without trouble, a little place called Bear's Den, about 20 miles northwest of headquarters. Everything looked normal from the outside. The roof was solid, windows intact, door properly latched. I spent the night there, made my radio check, and headed out the next morning feeling good about the trip. Cabin 2 was called Moose Creek Lodge, another 20 miles deeper into the forest. That's where things started to go wrong. I could smell it before I could see it. Something sharp and sour in the air, like meat left too long in the sun. But it was November in Alaska. Nothing should smell like that in this cold. I slowed the snowmobile, scanning the tree line. The forest felt different somehow. Too quiet. I'd been in these woods long enough to know when something was off. The cabin door was missing. Not just open, completely gone. Torn right off its hinges and thrown into the snow 20 feet away. The wooden frame around the door was splintered like something had punched through it from the inside. Broken glass sparkled in the snow beneath the shattered windows. All the glass was outside, the cabin. Not inside where it should be if someone had broken in. I pulled my rifle off the snowmobile and approached carefully. The smell got stronger with each step, sweet and rotten, with something else underneath that made my stomach turn. I'd smelled death before. Car accidents, hunting accidents, natural deaths in the wilderness. This was different. This was worse. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone in there?" The silence that came back felt heavy and wrong. I stepped through the doorframe, boots crunching on broken glass. The inside of the cabin was destroyed. Furniture overturned, walls gouged with deep scratches. The scratches looked like they'd been made with fingernails, but no human fingernails could cut that deep into solid wood. That's when I saw him. The hunter was sprawled in the back corner, or what was left of him. I'd seen bear attacks before, but this was different. The bite marks were all wrong. Too small for a bear, but too big for any other animal I knew. They looked almost human, except the jaw would have to be much wider and the teeth much longer. The strangest thing was the blood. There should have been pools of it everywhere, but the floor was mostly clean, like something had licked it up. I felt my breakfast rising in my throat. I was backing toward the door when I slipped on a piece of broken glass. It cut right through my work glove and into my palm. My blood dripped onto the floor, mixing with the dark stains already there. I wrapped my hand in my bandana and got out of that cabin as fast as I could. That was my first mistake. I should have turned around right then. Should have fired up the snowmobile and raced back to headquarters to report what I'd found. But 25 years of ranger training kicked in. Document the scene. Look for clues. Figure out what happened so it doesn't happen again. I spent the next hour circling the cabin, taking photos and notes. The tracks in the snow told a strange story. Human footprints led up to the cabin, boot prints from someone walking normally. But the prints leading away were different. Longer. The toes stretched out like claws, and they were spaced too far apart, like whoever made them was much taller than whoever had walked up. The prints led northwest, deeper into the forest. I followed them for about a mile before they disappeared into rocky ground where no snow had stuck. Whatever had made them was heading toward Cabin 3, another 15 miles away. I made my radio check that evening, reporting the death but leaving out the weird details. No point sounding crazy over the radio. Help would come eventually, but not for days with the storm moving in. I had a job to finish. My hand throbbed where I'd cut it, even through the bandages. By morning, it felt hot and swollen. The cut looked infected already, with red streaks running up my wrist. I took some antibiotics from my medical kit and tried not to worry about it. The weather was getting worse. The temperature dropped 20 degrees overnight, and snow started falling hard. I could barely see 50 feet through the swirling white. But I pressed on toward Cabin 3, called Wolf's Den. The trail was getting dangerous, but I'd traveled these paths so many times I could find them blindfolded. It took me 6 hours to cover 15 miles. By the time I reached Wolf's Den, I was frozen solid, and my snowmobile was running low on fuel. I needed to warm up and rest before I could go any further. The cabin looked normal from outside. Door closed, windows intact, no broken glass in the snow. I felt relieved as I unloaded my gear and prepared to settle in for the night. Maybe whatever had happened at Moose Creek was an isolated incident. Maybe the hunter at Wolf's Den would know something about it. I knocked on the door. "Hello, Park Service." A voice answered from inside, weak and shaky. "Help me, please." My heart started racing. I tried. The door, unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, rifle ready. "I'm coming in. Where are you?" "Back here. I'm hurt bad." The cabin was dark, except for the dying embers in the fireplace. I could make out a shape on the floor near the back wall. As my eyes adjusted, I saw it was a man, lying on his side with his back to me. "What happened?" I asked, moving closer. "Are you injured?" "Something attacked me," the man whispered. "Yesterday. I've been hiding here ever since." I knelt down beside him, setting my rifle within reach. "Let me take a look at your injuries. I have medical training." That's when he turned around. His face wasn't right. The bones looked longer, somehow, stretched out. His eyes were too bright in the darkness, reflecting light like an animal's, and his teeth, when he smiled, I saw fangs where his canine teeth should be. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice was different now, deeper, hungrier. I dove for my rifle, but he moved faster than anything human should move. 1 second he was lying on the floor. The next he had me pinned against the wall. His strength was impossible. I might as well have been fighting a grizzly bear. His fingers had grown into claws. They dug into my shoulders as he leaned close to my face. His breath smelled like rotten meat. "You smell different," he whispered, sniffing at my neck. "Sick, sweet. The change is starting in you too, isn't it?" I didn't understand what he meant, but terror gave me strength. I brought my knee up hard, catching him in the stomach. He doubled over with a grunt, and I rolled away toward the door. "You can't run from it," he called after me as I stumbled outside. "It's in your blood now. You'll understand soon enough." I fired up the snowmobile and got out of there, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Behind me, I heard a sound that will haunt me forever. Laughter that was half human and half something else entirely. I should have been heading back to headquarters. Should have been calling for help on the radio. But the storm was getting worse, and I was still 10 miles from the nearest shelter. The wind was howling like a living thing, and the snow was so thick I couldn't see the trail. I had to find somewhere to hole up until morning. Cabin 4 was called Pine Ridge, about 8 miles northeast through the worst part of the forest. I knew there was an old trapper's shack halfway there where I could wait out the storm. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely steer the snowmobile, and not just from the cold. The cut on my palm was burning like fire now. When I pulled off my glove to look at it, the wound had turned black around the edges. The red streaks were spreading up my arm, and I could feel heat radiating from them even through my heavy coat. Whatever had been on that glass at Moose Creek, it was doing something to me. I found the trapper's shack just as my snowmobile ran out of gas. The little building was half buried in snow, but the door still opened. Inside, it was cold as a tomb, but at least I was out of the wind. I used my emergency radio to try calling headquarters. Static. Nothing but static on every frequency. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes I saw that man's face. Those bright eyes and terrible teeth. And what he'd said about the change starting in me. What change? What was happening to my hand? Around midnight, I heard something outside. Footsteps in the snow, circling the shack. Slow and deliberate, like someone was studying the building. I grabbed my rifle and pressed myself against the wall next to the door. The footsteps stopped right outside. Then I heard breathing, deep, slow breaths like someone was smelling the air. A long silence. Then a voice, soft and almost human. Jack Thornfield." My blood went cold. How did it know my name? "I can smell your fear, Jack. And your sickness. The infection is spreading faster than usual. Must be the diabetes. Your blood is so sweet." I didn't answer, didn't move, didn't even breathe. "I know you're in there. I can hear your heart beating. So fast, so frightened. But there's nothing to be afraid of. Soon you'll understand. Soon, you'll be like us." The thing outside started laughing. That same horrible sound I'd heard at Wolf's Den. Then the footsteps moved away, circling the shack one more time before disappearing into the storm. I spent the rest of the night sitting with my back against the door, rifle across my knees, watching the windows. Every shadow looked like movement. Every sound from the storm sounded like footsteps. When morning finally came, I was half crazy from fear and exhaustion. But something else had changed during that long night. I felt different. Stronger somehow, despite being sick. My vision was sharper. I could see details in the dim light that should have been invisible. My hearing had improved too. I could pick out individual sounds in the storm that would have been just noise before. And I was hungry. Hungry in a way I'd never felt before. Not just for food, but for something else. Something raw and warm and alive. I tried to push those thoughts away as I hiked toward Pine Ridge. My snowmobile was useless without fuel, so I had to go on foot through deep snow. It should have been impossible for a man my age and condition, but somehow I felt stronger with every step. The diabetes symptoms that had plagued me for years were gone. My blood sugar felt normal for the first time in months. Pine Ridge Cabin sat in a clearing at the top of a small hill. Smoke was rising from the chimney. Someone was home. I felt a surge of relief mixed with something else, something hungry and predatory that scared me. I knocked on the door, trying to sound normal. "Park service, just checking on the cabin," a woman's voice answered. "Oh, thank goodness, we were hoping someone would come. My husband is very sick." She opened the door, a young woman, maybe 30, with worry lines creasing her face. Behind her, I could see a man lying on a cot near the fireplace. "I'm Jack Thornfield," I said, stepping inside. "What's wrong with your husband?" "He was attacked 3 days ago. Something in the woods. The wounds won't heal, and he's been having fever dreams, saying crazy things." I looked at the man on the cot. His skin was pale and sweaty, and when he turned to look at me, his eyes had that same bright gleam I'd seen at Wolf's Den. "You," he whispered, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "You're changing too. I can smell it on you." The woman looked confused. "What's he talking about?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because part of me, a part that was growing stronger every minute, understood exactly what he meant. The man on the cot sat up slowly, and I saw the wounds on his neck and arms. Bite marks, just like the dead hunter at Moose Creek. But these wounds were healing wrong, the edges turning black and spreading like infection. "How long ago were you bitten?" he asked me. "I wasn't bitten," I said. "I cut my hand on some glass." He laughed, a sound that was becoming less human by the hour. "Same thing, blood to blood, that's how it spreads." "How long ago?" I looked at my bandaged palm. 2 days. "Then you've got maybe 6 hours left, 6 hours before you become like us." The woman backed toward the wall. "What are you talking about? Become like what?" I was starting to understand, and the knowledge filled me with horror. "The thing that attacked the hunter at Moose Creek. The thing that's been stalking me. You're turning into one of them." "We all are," the man said. He stood up from the cot, and I could see he was taller than he should be. His limbs had stretched out, and his fingernails had grown into claws. "It's wonderful, Jack. No more pain, no more weakness, no more loneliness." The woman screamed and ran for the door. The man moved faster than any human could move, catching her before she'd gone 3 steps. She fought him, but his strength was inhuman now. I raised my rifle, but hesitated. He had been human just minutes ago. Maybe he still was, underneath whatever was changing him. That hesitation cost the woman her life. I turned away from what happened next, but I couldn't block out the sounds. When it was over, the man looked at me with blood on his lips and that bright gleam in his eyes. "Your turn is coming," he said. "I can smell the change accelerating. Your body is fighting the infection, but it's losing. Soon you'll understand the hunger." He was right. I could feel it happening inside me. My bones ached like they were stretching. My teeth felt loose in my gums, and underneath it all was a growing appetite for something I didn't want to name. "Fight it," I whispered to myself. "Fight it." But the man heard me and laughed. "You think you're the first to try? I was a teacher before this, had a wife and 2 little girls. I fought it for 3 days, locked myself in my car, tried to starve it out. But the hunger grows stronger than everything else, stronger than love, stronger than human will." I backed toward the window, keeping the rifle trained on him. How many others are there? Dozens now, maybe hundreds. It started with one hunter who came back wrong from a camping trip. He infected others, and they infected others. "We're building something out here, Jack. A new kind of family." My radio crackled to life. A voice from headquarters, faint through the static. "Thornfield, do you copy? Weather's clearing. We're sending a rescue team to your location." The man's eyes lit up with hunger. "Fresh meat coming to us. How convenient." I had to warn them. had to stop this thing from spreading. But as I reached for the radio, pain shot through my body like lightning. My bones were definitely growing now, stretching my skin tight. My vision sharpened until I could see every detail of dust motes floating in the air. "Don't fight it," the man said, moving closer. "Accept what you're becoming." Instead, I turned the rifle on myself. The man lunged forward, but I was faster. The infection had made me faster than any human should be. I pressed the barrel to my chest, finger on the trigger. "If I kill myself, it stops with me," I said. "You think death will stop it?" He laughed. "The infection doesn't need a living host. Kill yourself, and you'll just come back hungry." My finger hesitated on the trigger. In that moment of doubt, he tackled me to the floor. The rifle went off, the bullet shattering a window. We rolled across the floor, fighting for control of the weapon. His strength was incredible, but my body was changing too. I was stronger than I'd been in 20 years. We crashed into the fireplace, scattering burning logs across the floor. The dry wood of the cabin caught fire immediately. Flames spread up the walls, filling the air with smoke. "Now you've killed us both," the man snarled. But as the fire spread, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Fear. The creature might be stronger than human, but it was still afraid of burning alive. "Good," I said, and threw myself on top of him, holding him down as the flames grew higher. The pain was indescribable as the fire reached us. But I held on, knowing that I was saving the rescue team, saving my children, saving everyone who might have become infected if this thing had lived. The last thing I remember was the man's scream as the flames took him, and the distant sound of helicopters approaching through the clearing sky. I woke up in a hospital bed 3 weeks later. The doctors said it was a miracle I'd survived. Third-degree burns over 60% of my body, smoke inhalation that should have killed me, and massive blood loss. But somehow, I'd lived through it all. They called it the strongest will to live they'd ever seen, if they only knew the truth. I told them the official story, that I'd found evidence of attacks at multiple cabins, that I'd been trapped with another survivor when the cabin caught fire. The investigators found the bodies and declared it a series of animal attacks, probably a rabid bear. Case closed. But I know the truth, and I know it's not over. The cut on my palm healed completely, leaving no scar. My diabetes disappeared permanently. The doctors called it stress-induced remission. My vision stayed sharp, my hearing stayed keen. Sometimes at night, I catch myself listening for sounds in the forest that no human ear should be able to hear. The hunger comes and goes. Mostly, I can ignore it, fill it with normal food. But sometimes, especially when the moon is dark, I dream about the taste of warm blood and wake up with my teeth feeling too sharp for my mouth. I never went back to the forest. I retired early, moved to a small town in Arizona where the desert sun feels good on my scarred skin. I tell people, the burns came from a cabin fire, which is true enough. I don't tell them about the other things that fire burned away. But every winter, when the news reports strange attacks in remote areas of Alaska, I pay attention. Last year it was 3 hikers found dead near Denali. This year it was a missing family camping in Glacier Bay. The bite marks are always wrong for normal animals. The blood loss is always too complete. The infection is still out there, spreading one victim at a time. And sometimes, I wonder if I really stopped it that night, or if I just delayed it. Sometimes I wonder if part of it is still inside me, waiting. I keep a loaded gun in my nightstand now, not to protect myself from whatever might be out there in the dark, to protect everyone else from what I might become. Because on those nights when the hunger grows too strong, when I dream of running through snowy forests on feet that are no longer quite human, I remember the last words that thing spoke to me. Kill yourself, and you'll just come back hungry. And I'm starting to think he was right. If you're reading this, and strange attacks start happening in the desert towns of Arizona, you'll know the infection finally won. You'll know that some hungers are too strong for human will to overcome forever. But until then, I keep fighting it. Day by day, night by night. My name is Jack Thornfield, and this is the truth about what happened in the Chugach National Forest in November of 1967. I'm telling you because someone needs to know, and because I'm running out of time,